Um, moving right along here, we've got Anders. Now, he asks, what if the elves had not realized Sauron's treachery and the elven rings had fallen under his sway? So, okay, with a lot of the what ifs, um, there are a lot of good ideas out there. And the tough thing is making like a full video on some of these would be, I don't know how I can make it not one dimensional because with something like this, if the elves had fallen under Sauron's sway, that would have been it, right? Like Sauron would have won, and it wouldn't have even been hard at that point.
I mean, it's kind of the thing where it's like some of these have like these what if scenarios, like you were saying, have like one dimension, but others of them have like so many branching possibilities. But I don't see a way. I don't see a universe where a united elven and orcish threat doesn't just wipe the whole continent.
Oh yeah. How it would likely go is they would have destroyed the elves or the dwarves. Sorry, the elves would have destroyed the dwarves quickly, and if there were any elves who resisted, they would have just gotten enslaved or killed. And so yeah, no, exactly like you said, they would have taken the continent. The only one who could have defended for a time would have been the Numenorians, and they actually would have put up a pretty good fight. But even then, you have like Gilgalad, Elrond, Celeborn, Galadriel, all of these folk, Círdan, and then you've got Sauron, and they all invade Numenor. Yeah, that would have been it.
Plus the Nazgul,
Oh
let's not
yeah,
forget about his normal forces.
yeah, exactly. It's always the tough thing, and that's why it's been like my what if videos in general have been a little bit more seldom that I've done them is because most scenarios, if you we've talked about this a bit, if you tweak the system of the Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion a little bit, the West just utterly falls. Like they barely won. It's like what Galadriel says. Like the Fellowship is on the edge of a knife. Stray but a little, and like doom will come to all. And it's like it was totally true. They barely won. So if you switch, there are a couple things that I can think of that actually would have done better for the West against the darkness. Right? If Saruman wouldn't have turned evil, if Boromir hadn't died, if Theoden hadn't died, those would have been positives for the West. But yeah, no, it's pretty rough. Yeah, I mean, it would have been a pretty open and closed case. Again, it's a great question, but it's just there would be so much power under Sauron. Um, that would have been it, and Sauron is interesting because in the Second Age he really tried different tactics. He tried to master Middle Earth through deception and through trickery. That didn't work, so then he tried like hardcore force. He also got destroyed, like after the War of the Elves and Sauron. So he also had to use corruption again and kind of trickery to destroy Numenor, and then try
A
to
little bit of
take.
both.
Yeah, a little bit of both. So he tried some deception, he tried some war, took down Numenor, because they would have always toppled him, the Numenorians. So he was like, okay, trickery is going to work on them. But then in the War of the Last Alliance, like there was that kind of force that culminated. So um, yeah, no, it took a little bit of both for sure. And the elves almost knew, they almost fell under his sway, but they realized his treachery and took off their rings.
So before we move on and kind of bury this one, I know we have a lot, but I do actually have a question. So
Yeah,
the men that bore the rings of power that were given to them, basically just they got wrecked.
yeah,
Complete willpower taken over.
yeah.
There's nothing left. The dwarves, however, they still ended up kind of inadvertently aiding Sauron in the long term,
Yeah.
but they didn't just like fall under his whim, right? They
Yeah.
kind of just became greedy and when, were just kind of overall a problem, but
Yeah,
not inadvertently attacked. So even if they hadn't realized, do you think that the elves would kind of fare a little bit better than, if not similar to the dwarves, or would they have fallen completely like under spell like the men were, or would they have a completely different reaction to it? Do you think?
That's a
Because the general gist is that elves like I think we both agree if if Sauron had taken over the elven like leaders and therefore like their forces, everybody dies. End of discussion.
Yeah.
But would that have actually happened? Would it have like changed them in a way that it didn't necessarily change the dwarves as much as it just like fed their more evil, greedy tendencies? Do you think that would happen with the elves? What is the elves' evil tendency? Just killing each other? Since they did that a lot in the first stage, or or would they just like leave?
That's a great point.
Here's what I think. Maybe if they're not completely being taken over, what the rings make them do is make the leaders give up hope, and so they evacuate Middle Earth much faster.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And then they leave it to be conquered by Sauron. But I don't even know if that's what Sauron wants. Does Sauron want the continent under his control because everybody left, or does he want it under his control because he took it from everybody?
It's a great question, and I can't answer for sure, but if I were to guess, so the dwarves were different because they were able to resist. Sorry, I got a big motorcycle in the background. Classic. Every time I go to record, there's like always a huge motorcycle. Anyway, so the dwarves were hardy, the hardiest of the race. So their wills couldn't be conquered by all, and they just fell under the corruption, like you said. The worst qualities in them inadvertently aided Sauron. But with the elves, they weren't as hardy as dwarves were, and I don't think their wills were as strong. So I imagine that their wisdom, if their wisdom had been gone to where they didn't recognize the deceit and the betrayal, and they were taken over, they probably would have been really strong. I think they would have fallen under his spell, but they would have just been stronger than the Nazgul. I think.
All right, there you go. That makes sense.
It's tough because it kind of asks a larger question of Tolkien.
Who has stronger power, the elves or the dwarves?
Yeah, and it's also like what like roles do dwarves play versus elves play in Middle Earth at large? And Tolkien wasn't as concerned with dwarves as much as he was with elves. And so Sauron, if it's like, okay, the dwarven rings didn't work, we're just going to destroy the dwarves. Like, whatever. Because the elves are more of my worry. But if the elves are on our side, they're just going to be the dwarves are just going to be a thorn in my side. But we can take them down. And that's probably what would have happened. But I imagine that the elves would have fallen under his sway because high elves live in both the unseen realm and the seen realms. I think they wouldn't have gone fully Nazgul because they also live within the unseen realms. But I don't know if they would have been wraiths. Would have been wraiths either. It's so hard to know for sure. And Sauron's ultimate plan in Middle Earth, from what I can gather, he ultimately wanted order. I think Morgoth wanted to dominate, he wanted to create, and he wanted to make the world his own. But Sauron almost didn't want to create, he just wanted to put everything in order that as he wanted. Morgoth's almost a little more chaotic evil than Sauron is. Sauron's a little more lawful evil, from what I can gather. Because even when the mouth of Sauron came to, like during the or right before the Battle of the Black Gate, he came out of the gate and said, these are his terms. You will all remove across the Anduin, and you'll take oaths never to raise arms against Sauron again, but you'll be left to your own affairs. However, you're going to help Sauron rebuild Isengard, and the greatest servant of Sauron will live there, which the mouth of Sauron was talking about himself, or just like the servant of Sauron will live there, and that would be like the dictator of the West, while Sauron just had like the high kingship of the whole world, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So he just kind of wanted the whole world, but I don't know if he was lying. That's always the tough thing, is maybe he was more chaotic evil and actually just wanted to destroy all the free peoples and just have the world to himself. But I don't know. I think he wanted slaves. He wanted to have order.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say if the elves fell under his dominion, I imagine
everyone dies.
Yeah.
That's
I imagine like Gil-galad, because the first three elves to get the rings were Gil-galad, Círdan and Galadriel, they would have fallen under his sway, and elves probably would have broken out in civil war, or they all would have just followed their kings and queen, or lady, and then they would just sort of destroyed the dwarves, fought against the Numenors until the Numenorians finally died. So yeah, yep, I would say that would probably be it. But I can, again, it's a pretty good, it's a really good idea. So perhaps I'll make that someday. It's just it would be a dark theory, and most of my theories are dark because again, you just change one thing and it really it doesn't really end well most of the time.
And if you were going to make a video, it's like change one thing to make the good guys completely hard stomp. It's like, it's not as cool. It's not as interesting.
Exactly.
Unless it's funny. It's like,
yeah, just so nihilistic.
Change one thing. Make Tom Bombadil have care. A care in the world. Boom.
I did do that as an April Fool's video.
I know.
Yeah.
I remember.
That was a fun
That was 2 or 3 years ago now.
Oh yeah. What if the Free Peoples simply walked into Mordor? 2019, I think? Something like that.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was a good time.